Hi, Christine.
Well, hey,
Hey, happy summer.
it's summer. Look, we were just hanging out together and it was cooler. And today's a oh, I was just in Vegas for a couple days on business, but coming back to this muggy weather, I'm like, what happened when I was gone? We were just at a beach
I
celebrating.
know. And I have to say, doing a hockey podcast over the summer break is very strange because, and I feel like all the podcasts are kind of like that. I've been listening to the other New York Rangers hockey podcasts, and it seems like we're all just kind of scrambling to find
What do
something
you do?
something to chat about. Although there has been some New York Rangers news, we've been up to some interesting stuff. I have to say, I think we've been traveling and checking out
Yeah, I'm
different
meeting
events.
other sports players I don't know, to be quite honest.
We're learning. We're watching the Olympics. We're doing a lot of things that we wouldn't normally do. So this is how we keep busy during the off season. If anybody happens to be joining us for the first time, welcome to Double D-Fense. We're an all-female New York Rangers hockey podcast, and we're hosted by me, Liz, and Christine, who are two ex-New Yorkers who live in California, and we are counting down the days till the regular season.
And it's coming up. What are the odds that this is, we're going to have a good start to the season?
We should check bovadasportsbook.com and see what the odds are. And I've been thinking a lot about what the season's going to look like for the New York Rangers. I mean, I think the only real news to report is the re-signing of Lindgren for a one-year deal at I think $4.5 million. I guess they didn't want to sign him for longer, and I kind of understand that given the state that man's body is in. I don't think that the Rangers are counting on the fact that he will be in one piece at the end of the season. So maybe they want to
Well,
reevaluate, see what kind of scotch tape they can stick on this guy by the time the end of the season comes about. What do you
I
think,
also
Christine?
think it's a good proving year for him as I'm seeing everybody talk about it. So, some of these guys, I think, to the extent where we're seeing the rumors and what people are bantering about, I do agree that they should kind of limit terms to push them to reach the potential that they expect from them. And doing that, kind of forces them to do it because then they're on the market. And you do want them to be successful, so they're on the market at a good price and not just like a throwaway. It gets to be a catch-22. I always say, because the business side of things is we've seen the trades, we've heard the rumors. I have not acknowledged any of the rumors. You won't see me doing that. I see other people. I see it coming across like wildfire on things. So I don't acknowledge any of the rumors because they don't mean anything to me until they happen. Even with Lindgren, I think they're still working out a deal with Shosturkin, and we're going to see more things happen as it gets closer. So they're just tightening it up. And then I start to have that positive feel of the season. So I'm waiting for Bovada to have really good odds on the Rangers to start. So
We should check because I think they already have the odds for the Stanley Cup next year. I think that they're well ahead.
look,
I just wanted to ask you if you are Ryan Lindgren, what are you doing during the off season? Because if I were Lindgren, I'd be sitting in an oxygen chamber doing stretches for 3 months straight, like literally trying to heal my body as best as humanly possible.
well, look, I'm still recovering from the night we were dancing 2 weeks ago. And then walking around, I've done like 15,000 steps a day in Vegas at this conference I was at, and I'm moaning and groaning, and but I'm older too. So like he's young and he's an athlete, and I think they have a really crazy sense of tolerance for things
And
he's
Lindgren
not doing
especially.
crazy stuff. So
That
I
guy's
wouldn't
arm
be
could have fallen off. It's funny. It's funny watching, especially just watching like the Olympics too, and seeing like how tough some of these athletes are. And then you watch a sport like soccer, like football, but like soccer football, and you see how if somebody like lightly touches their shoulder, like they fall over and they scream.
yeah.
Meanwhile, like people like Lindgren are getting their faces smashed. The rugby players are
The
throwing each
rugby
other up and down. The
players do
gymnasts have
well.
been like unreal. I mean, that's been super cool, but it does put hockey into perspective.
Yeah. I think he's just still enjoying his time. Again, my thought would, if it were me, I'd be doing nothing, and massages and, you know, yeah, those kind of things. As I walked by, 100 stores in Vegas, like that give massage. I'm like, I want one of those. I want one of those. So, there was even like a chiropractic thing in the airport. I'm like, I want that. So I feel like he's his own, personal person that kind of, you know, just teaches him how to tolerate pain. Just like Rempe's got his new fight coach.
That's right. Yeah, that's part of the other news is that Rempe's been training with a fighting coach,
Yeah.
and I think I'm really excited to see him play next year. I think that's definitely up in the highlights for me of what I'm looking forward to in the next season to see what he's able to come back with.
Yeah, as we go into the new season, one of the things as we are kind of getting away from putting the real young kids onto the ice, although some of them should be moving up, which will be a curious thing to see. I think, and hopefully they're putting more of an expectation on them, So he was fun for the first year. So again, being that he's a big guy, but he has the ability to skate fast and shoot, and that you see more out of him besides the fighting. But at the end of the season, that's what most people are complaining about is we need enforcers, we need to be checking, we need to be doing this. So,
well, he needs to check in a way where he's not going to get a penalty called on him, and maybe that's part of the training.
See, it's that youthful floppiness of like, that's what I picture when he took out the double guy. His arms flying.
I picture a golden retriever on skates, like a smart golden retriever. Like, don't get me wrong, like a very smart golden retriever, but still just not really knowing how to control like the massive body that is on knife shoes hurtling toward another player.
That's going to be a great stat to watch for a betting thing on Bovada. So I want to be looking for that to see hits again. Like what kind of stats and bets are going to have for him to watch for. So that would be kind of fun to kind of follow and see. Yeah, look, I'm looking forward to it. Each day we get closer to the opening day and in the season, even with the pre games, which again have changed and don't mean anything anymore to me. It's going to get that exciting. Actually, some of the news I saw, we'll go into talking about some of the new rules that we saw were coming into play this year, and some, the ones that aren't, goalie interference. I thought it was interesting because they were talking about some of the teams, and it kind of made me excited. The Hurricanes had a lot of changes. They lost a lot of their, some good, people they had. They had Gunsel and they lost him, and they're not expecting him to get a good start or even kind of not a rebuild year, but there's going to be an adjustment period. So I think the prediction for them is that don't look for them being at the top of the list for the East Coast, and that they feel that they're going to make the playoffs, but they're going to lose pretty quickly. And I'm like, okay, I'm all for that. So
yeah. Do you want to talk again about the Hurricanes losing? That makes me very happy. That's one of my favorite topics. And I had a whole song about that last season.
And that the Devils should be more of a contender, but because they got hit with so many injuries last year. So it'll be curious to kind of see how they're doing based on what they were kind of predicting. So, again, we're going to kind of get into some highlighted games as we get closer to the opening season. I think we touched on some of those that were coming up. They have a whole list of like games to watch, the first Utah game.
Yeah.
Hopefully Bovada needs some odds on when they're going to change that to a real name.
I heard it was going to be like a year before they were going to get an actual team name. Maybe they'll be the Utah Jacob Troubas. Wouldn't that have a nice ring to it? We can only pray. We can only pray.
What about they're just losing all this marketing and material? Like again, when Vegas started, their marketing was like they were just on point from day negative whatever. And the minute and I still, when you go to Vegas and you see the things that they have, they're just, it's brilliant. I have to just, I just love what they've done to kind of start the team when they started it. And, and they have great things, and you just lose that opportunity when you have a new team. I mean, it is Utah. It's not as exciting as some of the other things. So, but are people really going to buy those shirts? No, I think I'm going to give Bovada a run for its money and put my own odds on. Like, and who's going to buy stuff right now from Utah?
Yeah. I know. Well, I think it's going to come down to, how well they do. And it's interesting with Vegas, obviously they came out like super showy, but then they backed it up with really good, playing, and then a Stanley Cup that came very soon into their franchise history. So maybe a lot will depend from Utah about what does this team actually look like? Do they get settled into a new arena? Do they find their fan base? It'll be interesting to see what happens. And it will be also interesting to see, the rest of the West also, how did the Oilers shape up this year? What changes do they make? Are they making changes? Are they happy with where they got to last year? Do they want to really try to push, some of the other Canadian teams that were supposed to go all the way, like the Canucks or the Jets? Like, where are they going to wind up? What is their team going to look like next year? And, for the Rangers coming in after, such a dominant start to the postseason, and then to, lose the way that they did to Florida, what does that mindset look like? And has anything changed in the offseason in terms of, coaching or strategy?
I'm not worried about us. Again, we do get closer and closer, and you can tell they're feeling it, and they have to figure out that formula that's going to get. And then we also kind of summed up from another player, kind of what that was. That you think you're going in there and you're doing your best, and you are playing your best, but when they're playing better and you're not prepared for it, or you don't understand, or just you can't match it, it happens. And so, and then what do? Do you give up, or do you fight and come back? And that's what these guys do.
And now they're coming in with another year of playoff experience under their belt, which might help guys like Miller. And some other player. The Miller had a good playoff. I'm not going to say that he didn't, but maybe there's growth that happens from that. My big question is with Kreider and Zibanejad, more Zibanejad than Kreider. What is he doing in the offseason? How is he going to show up? What's Panarin doing? I mean, these guys had great regular seasons for the most part. How can they? How can they make sure that come playoffs, and I know we're getting ahead, but come playoffs next year, that they're going to be able to deliver for this team?
I agree. We'll kind of see. I mean, like they have their own internal goals within themselves and their team that we don't know about.
What? I thought they tell us everything.
I know. Well, they're supposed to. We're delegating it for them. So eventually, and we'll see. I mean, I watched the game, a couple of years ago when Zibanejad hit the 5 goals in the game, right? And at that time, they were him and Panarin were on fire, just working together. And again, they change the lines up, they do different things. And at the end of the season, as much as we like or don't like what they do, they end up being, better than they were. So they are breaking their own records or certain team records, as we've seen. As much as everyone complains, we still see that. So I'm like, can't be that bad. So that there's going to be pressure, and that's the thing. They were on top the whole season. I think there's pressure to stay in that relative area throughout the season as they did, and they kind of broke some records. They went undefeated on the Canadian road trip. They had a winning streak record, and those things, I think, as we saw, we kind of talked about too, just builds up on that pressure where like Panarin had that point streak, and then when he was ready to break it, he didn't get it. So how much does that get to their heads and get in the way of their play? And so and just instead of just playing to win that game. Or like they would say, they're like, we want to win that period and that game and that shift. And then you kind of see them lose focus on that, or so it appears. So I like to bring it back to that. If you just focus on the shift and the period and the game, and then eventually you'll see the end, and it'll bring you all the way.
And also maybe this year, maybe everyone's kids will be a little bit older, so maybe they'll be sleeping better, and they, like, the new dads can just have a little R&R time.
You have to keep an eye on that.
Well, I was just thinking, like, they really need to time out a couple of things, and maybe stay away from their wives for the next, I'd say 3 months.
I mean, I think
after that, it's fine. I'm just counting out until June.
Like, I think there's a reason why these kids are born right around, the All-Star game.
They're planning.
Let's do the math. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I get it. And, of course, lots of respect, but Bovada should have like an over-under on what new Rangers babies will be born.
That's a great one.
Maybe we should do that. But, obviously family's super important. And, that keeps coming up with the Trouba conversation about, whether or not he moves somewhere, he's being very respectful of his wife's career and wanting to make sure that, she's able to work. So, you understand, like, these guys they are more than just players. But on the flip side of it, they're getting paid tons of money so that they are asked to
multiple houses and do things.
Yep. Yeah.
Speaking of Trouba, he's making his debut with his art show today, actually.
That's exciting. Good for him. I did check out some of the artwork. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? I'm not an artiste, so I couldn't tell you if that is great or abstract. It's very interesting.
I've always, even when he would run into the paintings and do that, I'm like, why didn't anybody else think of doing this? It's brilliant, and it comes out nice. And then there's other pieces and stuff that he has in there. I have to kind of look through a little bit more too, because it's enjoyable. But it opens today. I mean, he's from the Brooklyn area of New York, so I think it's opening there. And I hope people are going, and we'll kind of put it out there to see if anyone's gone to it in person and to see what it's like. And
for those of you who don't know, I just want to describe what Trouba was doing. He basically, I think he'd put on all of his hockey gear, then he would roll around in paint, and then he would charge, as he does, at the wall, jump up, leave an imprint of himself, I guess, on a canvas on the wall. And that's sort of the basis for his art, which is really interesting. And I think, some of his paintings, when I started looking at them, I think they're meant to also symbolize, like, what's going on in your head as an athlete, what's going on in your head as a player. There were some really interesting interpretations that he had.
Yeah, and that's good. I know some of the comments on Reddit, which are just enjoyable. I mean, it's just like lighthearted. Some of them kind of went a little bit farther. I think one of them was like, it's the what is it? It's just putting a bullseye on his opponents, like heads or something. And
it's just pictures of some of the comments. It's just pictures of random players with targets on their heads.
Yeah, that one, which I thought that was great. I love that one.
Somebody else said, "Come on, Rangers, you can't trade him now. The art scene in New York would be devastated." And then somebody else said, "It's like trading Warhol."
I know that one. I was talking with Matthew about that one. That one was funny. Like, you can't trade him now, too. It's like, it is. And I don't know how successful it is. I know he was auctioning off some of her charity. He's going to use a lot of that for charity. But I think it's a great outlet, and utilizing what you have your equipment to create that is brilliant. So definitely props to him. I'm wishing for a very successful show and product that he has. So I'm going to reach out and see if people, in the New York area, if anyone's going to hit it up and see it in person. Hopefully they share pictures and share their experience. And hopefully it's still going on when I get there, like during hockey season.
Totally. And, I think the interesting thing about it is that Art it is about like your perspective, and what an interesting perspective he has, and not something that you ever really hear from professional players. I mean, I'm sure Bovada doesn't have like the odds on how many like art pieces a hockey player is going to come out with this year. So I do think that's really cool, and I really do respect it, even if we joke about him getting traded.
Yeah, well, you never know. So the season hasn't begun yet. We're, again, as we said in the beginning, there's still more things that are going to happen. Rumors are going to fly. Well, they never stop, actually. So they just continue. So I don't encourage anybody to follow that or to create it, because it's garbage. And just wait till the news comes out when it's a done deal for stuff. So then it is what it is. I mean, what are you going to do? So we'll do that. So let's go into. So one of the things I was reading today too is we're looking at having about 4. I think they just approved, since we last spoke, on a couple of rule changes that the GMs all got together, and I think they were approved as of like the end of June, so very recent. And it looks like there's 4. One of them is the delay of game penalty. So now in the next season, they've agreed that the coaches will be able to challenge that. And we did see a lot of that where it's like it wasn't their stick, it wasn't anything, and they get the penalty for it. So they're able to challenge that now. Although the difference is if they lose the challenge, they end up with a 4-minute. They end up with 2 minutes.
Interesting.
2 minutes. So that's adding on to the ramifications of calling a call just a call. Although I never think they do that. Another one was if the net comes loose, if the goalie dislodges the net, then they are not allowed to change lines, so they have to keep the men on the ice. And I guess that's just an expansion of it, where that would only happen if a defenseman or somebody dislodged the net. But now it's the team. And then the other 2 were just more on warnings. They're like basically in the face-off circle, each guy gets 1 warning. And I'm like, how many did they get before?
Yeah. Was it just like unlimited warnings?
For like on the face-off. I never understand that anyway, to be honest, is what causes them to get out of get thrown out of the circle.
Yeah, because they never like properly mic up anybody who's talking. So you never hear like whatever banter is happening between the ref and the player.
Yeah. And then, we've seen the 1 or 2 weird call penalties for like touching the puck with your hand. Like, some of these, there are more penalties than we normally see. And it's interesting when we kind of see these one-off things get called where you're like, I have to look this up. So, and I'm not the only one, for things like that. And then the other one they said was, and I don't really necessarily know if I see this. I wasn't paying attention, but sometimes they're kind of hanging over the wall to do line change. They're like, that's dangerous. So they're going to be given a warning to not do it. And they're going to, basically it's like, keep your feet in at all times until there's a proper line change.
Hands and arms inside the ride.
If they were doing that more, because I wasn't really paying attention, so I don't know. But it takes more time to actually physically come out as opposed to being halfway over the wall and jumping on the ice. So it'll be interesting to kind of pay attention a little bit to these line changes in the next season to see how smooth they go in that respect.
And also, whether the coaches pay attention to it, because I think we saw in the playoffs, I can't remember which game it was, but there was definitely a circumstance where the coach didn't know like the actual rule that had changed. So, it'd be interesting to see, how much the coaches pay attention to this stuff too. I think the delay of game thing is interesting because I think that call, I think it was called way too often for times that it clearly was like an accident. So, and I feel like it's quite hard if they can't like challenge and review it. So I like that. I like that change, but 4 minutes that's a big penalty for going against it.
Although, I do feel that because those are the ones that they replay right in front of everybody and everyone's like, you didn't even touch them, but they can't do anything about it. So I do think that it's easier to establish if it's a real call or not. The one thing that they discussed, but they aren't changing, of course, is the goalie interference rule. So I wonder why like that's such a hard thing. We've discussed ideas. I've discussed ideas with other people, and the way they even had it before.
Mm-hmm.
They've kind of changed it to make it more objectionable, and that's the goalie interference and even like the kicking motion.
I was going to say, yeah, kicking the puck. I'm sure they couldn't figure out any possible way to make that make sense. There's not one possible way.
Yeah. So those are still way too, subjective, and we're going to see a lot more of that. It'll
sure.
see if these change. They're also, and we'll kind of get into this more later because I want to see how it's doing. I think we kind of discussed. Is it the European League they're starting a rule with overtime where you can't I think it's like you can't pass it across the center line, so it's made to kind of keep the play more intense and going, so that you're not just delaying it and playing chase. So you can't pass the puck over 2 lines in overtime. So there were kind of rules to make it go. There were discussions on overtime and maybe extending overtime, although they were saying that that's really not necessary, because they were saying about 70% of overtime games actually ended in overtime and didn't go to shootouts. So there seems to be more talk about that might institute a change in the next season or two. So that'll be kind of curious to watch. And they are kind of talking about it, and there are changes being made in the European League. So I wonder how, like, watching those leagues, kind of see how they go, if it influences any change here. So
well, we'll definitely keep an eye on that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that'll be good. So that's pretty much the news for stuff I wanted to. So we are in summer. We just had a girls' weekend. We did some things. I had a couple sport opportunities through business to kind of go and enjoy a Rams game, which I kind of shared with, on our page with everybody. And that was really fun. I met 2 players I didn't know who they were. Apparently they are the bromance of football, just like Krygenovat.
So we should learn. We're due for a new sport soon.
With Cooper Cup and Kua. So yeah, no hate mail. And I don't know who you guys. But I get it. I mean, I'm more intrigued. I mean, the way you are here that's what I am with my team. So it was exciting to see everybody. What I was really bummed about was apparently the Kings players were right next to us the same day, and I did not know. Mm-hmm. So I was like, dang it. If I would have known, that would have been even more fun. But I was asking, these kids were young. So the 2 of them were from North Carolina, and because I was talking about practicing in weather and stuff, because it was really hot that day. They're doing these public trainings, and it was 100 degrees. And they're like, yeah, we're from North Carolina. So yeah, it was, really wasn't that bad. And the guy's talking to me, and he's like, yeah, but I didn't even really want to be a football player. I started a different sport. I'm like, oh, what sport? He's like, soccer. And then I kind of course, I took the opportunity to ask him about hockey, and he's like, oh, I've never watched a game. I could be a Hurricanes fan, but yeah, I've never watched a game or anything. And then he was cute. He was like, have you seen Inside Out 2? I'm like, how old are you?
I was going to say, is he 12?
But I have. And by the way, Inside Out 2, if you have not seen it, anybody listening, if you haven't seen it, it's a hockey movie. It is really good. And I don't have I want to get better information. We talk about it next time. Because I think they had like a hockey expert female who helped design like the animation for the clothing, the outfits and uniforms that they wore, because it's about a girl in her teen years, and she plays on the hockey team. So there was very much a lot of hockey going into this, as well as her, teenager dealing with her emotions. And it was really cute. And one of the PWHL players has a guest role in playing an announcer in the movie too. So it's it was really a fun movie. So yeah, so he knows hockey, and he related it to that because he was 22, and I was like, oh yeesh. So now these kids are getting to be younger than my own children. So they, football and baseball. And I went to a baseball game, and I just also want to, some of the things I learned. So 2 things I learned about baseball. one, and Bovada's got, by the way, Bovada's got really good odds for the Olympic Games and stuff. So I learned yesterday, talking with my child, that there's no baseball in the Summer Olympics this year. And I'm like, why not? Because France doesn't have a baseball team. I'm like, why does that matter?
That's interesting.
I know, and but reading about it, it's not a permanent sport in the Olympics. So I'm like, what?
But I'm pretty sure they have it for the LA 2028 games.
Yeah, they will. They will. So I guess if it's not a permanent sport, then there's discretion on the country that's hosting it. So did not know that. So it's very interesting. The other thing I learned with baseball when I went to the game, I went to an Angels game. So I'll share pictures with that because we had a nice VIP experience there too. So I like being spoiled, and I thank everybody, and I'm definitely going to use it and share it. But they have like a clock now for a pitch clock. So, and I think that came into play in the last year or two, year or two. So now they, when they're doing, because they were changing within an inning, and then there was these other pitchers just sauntering across the field. I'm like, well, they don't look like they're walking like there's a game in session right now. They're just like, I'm like, what are they doing? And then I noticed this clock. So they get 2 or 3 minutes between innings. I have to make sure I don't say periods. I mean, I know baseball, but I'm not really into it. And then between each of the batters, they have like 2 minutes, and that clock goes. And my understanding is that if the clock runs out and it's the pitcher's fault, it's a ball. So against them. And if it's on the batter and the clock runs out because of what they're doing, then it's a strike. So they're penalized on that.
I think I think what baseball is trying to do is not have their games be 5 hours long.
Yeah,
because I mean, baseball games can go a really long time with not a lot happening.
Yeah, and we discussed that too. So basically, they've when these games have gone well over 3 hours, it's cut it down considerably to about a 2.5 hour game. And so that's why, and it appears to be successful. So
I will say I like bringing my friends who have like only been to baseball games to hockey games, because they are so like astounded at how much action is in a hockey game. Because when you think about a hockey game, it's really only like technically 60 minutes of playing, but they're all like, oh my God, this is so intense, because they're used to baseball. And not that I don't like baseball, I actually really like baseball. And I think it's a really fun, enjoyable, like game to experience live, to have on TV. I think it's really fun, but it's a very different kind of sport. But I think they're trying to like keep the action going to keep people excited.
So new rule. So for anybody who hasn't been to a baseball game in a while, go look at, and when you see a clock and you realize what's going on, you're welcome. I don't know. I was like, what's happening here? So I have not been to a baseball game in forever. So that was fun.
And Angel Stadium's a nice stadium. That's one of my favorite baseball stadiums.
Yeah. And then, I think there's amongst young people, Matthew was saying that a lot of them are going outside like other rinks and flipping off like their opponents' rinks and stuff. Because in the background, if you're standing at Angel Stadium, in the background is Honda Center where the Ducks play. So they're just right across the freeway from each other if you don't know and you're not from here. And so it's very close, and it's an open stadium, so it's really nice. And they had fireworks that night, so it was a really fun night that we did last week. So so trying to kind of keep sports in our lives and, amongst all the news. So there are news, coming. Eric Stahl also retired. Bye. That's about what I feel. See ya. They're retiring his jersey and everything. And maybe hopefully his brother will retire too. And so, and then, yay, we can move on with life. So we, those are really the latest news items for things coming up. We are still seeing a lot of there's going to be still inking of deals and stuff. And kind of going back to your Edmonton thing, I want to kind of keep an eye on them too, because they remind me of the Sharks had a good team. You know, they had Thornton and they had Pavelski on there, and they had them, and they were glued, and they kept them. They kind of felt like they had faith in them for so long, and they never traded these guys. I think that's what's going to have to happen to Edmonton at some point. You know, especially when you know that when you have those 2-3 guys, and it's that line that, and the only time they're scoring, as they admitted, they made it far, but they admitted they don't score if these guys aren't on the ice. So how long is that going to kind of last? So that if I'm watching them, I'm watching that for that aspect to see, are they going to learn from the mistakes that like the Sharks did and had them, and you know, look what happened when they made that change. It was drastic, although it's been a couple of years since they both have been on a team together. But you know, the Sharks have still kind of been at the bottom and haven't been able to regroup and move up. So yeah, at what point do you kind of say, you guys are great, but we got to mix things up to make it better, you know, make it greater? And they don't. I don't really see them doing that.
Yeah. So I'm curious about how Knobloch adjusts for next season, given how far they went. You know, what changes, if any, he makes, or he's just going back in to say, okay, we obviously did something right. Let's keep with the same strategy and see how far we can get this time.
I need him to not look so clueless about everything.
Yeah, but he was clueless about everything. That's like the best part. Like Game 7, like what's that? I've never been here before. I think he was just. I think they were thrilled. They probably had a big parade, even though they lost.
Look, it was a big, huge year for him and the team. They didn't start off well. McDavid was out and injured, and then things mixed. It reminded me, because again, I was in Vegas and I was at the beer house. So props to Anna, the bartender, who remembered who I was. And that's what Double D-Fense is, making our impressions where we go. But it reminds me of that first year we went to the Vegas game, and the Rangers did really well. I think we had the Knights up by 5 points, like whatever, and everybody cleared out. It was just Rangers. It was a Ranger game. And the people were talking outside, they're like, oh, they're just not doing well. They can't win road trips. And everyone was just kind of not defeated, but you know, with that realization that they weren't doing well, and they won the Stanley Cup that year. So things can turn around at any point in the season, you know. And as we go into the next season, it's have faith in your team. You're still complaining anyway, because
that's what we're here for. Well, on that note, Christine, thank you so much for sharing what you've been up to this summer and talking so much hockey and other sports. I think we have a lot of more exciting stuff planned for the rest of the summer, including possibly another trip. We'll talk about that as it gets later. And then, you know, for anyone just joining us, again, thank you for listening. Please give us a follow on our Instagram, which is double_D-Fense without the E. So it's double_DFENSE. And we will see you soon.
We'll see you soon, guys. Have a great week.